Hi everyone, my name is Celeste. Welcome and thank you so much for being here. Today's video is going to be all about shoulder anatomy, so let's get started. Continuing with our series from head to toes, this month's theme is going to be all about shoulders. Now, before starting with the video, I would like to invite you all to a free online workshop I am going to be hosting the 26th of February. We're going to be taking a look at the basic shoulder anatomy, but I am also going to be giving you some tips and tricks that you can use to improve the overall functionality of your shoulders, as well as some brain hacks that you can use to spice up your practice. At the end of the workshop, I am going to be teaching a 20-minute shimmy shoulders flow so we can put all the new knowledge into practice. If you're keen to join the workshop, then I'm going to leave the link in the description box below where you can go register. And the good news is that if you cannot attend live, I'm going to make sure to send you the recording of the class to all the people that have registered to the workshop. Okay, so without talking any longer, let's get to the class. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is the bones that make up the shoulder joint. So we've got three, and they are: the first one is the clavicle, aka collarbone. The second one is the humerus, aka upper arm bone. And the third one is the scapula, aka shoulder blade. Now, I remember that at some point I used to think that the shoulder joint was just the humerus connecting to the scapula, and that was about it. But it turns out that there are four joints that make up the shoulder structure. So let's take a look at those. Okay, so I took the top off just for you to be able to appreciate the trace that I am going to be taking you through. So we're going to start at the center of the chest, this bone right in the middle. We can trace it up and down, and perhaps we can press and move up and down the fingers to perceive the quality of this bone. This bone is called the sternum. And if we trace it all the way up, at some point it's going to finish. And there's a little smile there. If we trace the smile all the way up, we're going to find a point, and this point is where your sternum meets your clavicle. The cool thing about the joints that make up the shoulder is that the names are literally a connection of the two bones that make it up. So for example, in this case, we've got the clavicle and the sternum, and it's called the sternoclavicular joint. Now, really fun fact and cool about this joint is that this little dude point here is the only part that connects the arm with your axial skeleton. So all this structure is connected to the center of your body only through this tiny little joint here, perhaps a little bit neglected, don't really pay too much attention to this one. Okay, so if we continue, we trace the clavicle out towards the shoulder. At some point, the clavicle is going to meet your shoulder blade through a part of your shoulder blade called the acromion. So this joint is going to be called the acromioclavicular joint. Now, the third joint is the one that we are more familiar with, that is the connection of your humerus, your upper arm bone, with your scapula. And this is called the scapulo-humeral joint. Now, you might be wondering what's the fourth joint that makes up the shoulder, and this is your scapulothoracic junction. Now, basically, this is the way your scapula rests over your rib cage. This part is incredibly important when it comes to stability around the shoulder, and we're going to be talking in a little bit more detail about this in another video. Another very important thing to learn about the shoulders is something called the scapulo-humeral rhythm. Now let's take a look at why this scapulo-humeral rhythm is actually important in the strength, stability, and mobility of the shoulder joint. So let's take a look at this. You can go in front of a mirror and look at your own body, how this works in your own body, because it might be different, it probably will be different than mine, but I'm going to show you more or less while I explain. So the idea is the following. We said that wherever the humerus moves, the scapula will move along in some sort of degree. Now, the scapula will glide over the rib cage, over the thorax, as the humerus moves. So this is very important because imagine the scapula would be glued to your rib cage, like literally stuck there, immovable. You couldn't move it at all. Then it would incredibly decrease the range of motion of your shoulder, because imagine I would lift the humerus, the scapula wouldn't move, and remember that the humerus is connected to the scapula in this socket joint. It's a little bit shallow, it's not like hugging it, it's a bit more shallow. So if I would move the humerus, the scapula wouldn't move and it would stop, literally the bone would stop the humerus from going into a greater range of motion. So instead of being able to lift my shoulder all the way up here, because the scapula accompanies the movement, then if the scapula would be fixed, perhaps I would be able to go up to here, and that's all I would be able to move. Now, it's also important to remember that there are structures that live between the bones of the joint. So it would not only decrease in range of motion, but every time I would try to lift my arm, whatever direction really, the bones would kind of collapse into these structures such as tendons, nerves, and muscles. And trust me, this would create a lot of discomfort around this joint. So it's very important to remember that the scapula is part of all this structure. So we can take a look at it and train it and pay attention to this part of the joint so we can have better range of motion and more stability on our shoulders. All right, the last thing we're going to be talking about in this video is the mobility stability continuum. Now, this basically states that each joint of your body has its main purpose either to be stable or to be mobile. So let's take a look at this image where we can see that usually it alternates, one mobile, the next one stable, and so on. So let's take a look. We can check on our own body. So we can start with the fingers. So fingers look like they're super mobile, so their main job is mobility. The hand's main job is to be stable, so stability. Wrists would be mobility, elbow, stability, shoulder, as I said before, mobility, and scapula will be stability. Now I want us to remember that mobility is flexibility plus strength. So we are not talking here about how much range of motion we can take a joint into a passive stretch, so flexion and really pull with something, perhaps my other arm, or use a strap to pull my shoulder open, but rather how much range of motion we can take a joint into using the strength of our very own muscles. Okay, so that's all for today's class, but remember that the entire month we are gonna be working on the shoulders. So I wanted to give you the very basics of shoulder anatomy, but each class we are going to be talking about other things that are cool to know about the shoulders and how we can improve mobility, how we can make them stronger, and of course we are going to be talking about some brain activation that we can use to spice up the practice. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you have and you think that anyone might benefit from it, please feel free to share the love. Subscribe to my channel for more weekly content, and I will see you on the mat very soon. Bye bye.